Hello, my friends. Welcome to Thumb Together. We're going to talk about a movie, but I promise that this time we'll keep it short. Hi, folks. I'm Andrew Fantasia, and welcome to Thumb Together, where we're going to be talking about a movie together. And this one's kind of a special episode just because it is the final movie of 2017 that I will be covering on this show. I actually had to stop and think about that for a minute because I forgot which year it is. I hate when that happens. The movie we're talking about today is Downsizing. Downsizing is a science fiction, comedy, drama, one of those quirky little movies that's got a bunch of genres in it, and I love when movies do that. It's the new movie by Alexander Payne. If you don't know who Alexander Payne is, he is a very renowned director and writer. He made this little movie right here. And if you have not seen Sideways, please stop everything you're doing right now, including watching this, and go watch Sideways, because this is a great effing movie. You shan't be disappointed with Sideways. But he is responsible for this, and Downsizing is his latest motion picture extravaganza. It is a story about a theoretical future, near future, in which the whole idea of overpopulation, the whole, struggle of we have too many people and we're running out of food and water and resources, etc., etc. There are scientists, I believe from Norway, there are Norwegian scientists who solve this problem by finding a way to safely shrink human beings down until they're about this big. And that way, they will take up less resources. I mean, I need a huge meal, like a plate full of food to fill my stomach, but if I'm this big, I would literally need like 1/100th of that plate of food. So if everybody in the world shrank down to that size, the idea of running out of food, the idea of running out of water, and the idea of running out of space would no longer be a concern. And this idea alone sold me on this movie before I even walked into it. When I saw the trailer for this initially, I was like, this looks so damn cool. I love stories about people who shrink. I don't know why. I like that kind of stuff. I grew up watching stuff like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and the Incredible Shrinking Woman and whatnot. I like those kind of stories. They're fun. The Magic School Bus did it all the time. God, that was so much fun when they would go inside Arnold and he'd have to like poop them out and they'd be like, no, let's go through his ear or something. That was a dirty show sometimes. But in Downsizing, it's done as an environmental answer to a big problem that is like in real life plaguing humanity. Like this, we are in trouble. So the whole idea of downsizing becomes the norm. It takes like, I think 15, 20 years. And then after about 20 years of him discovering how to shrink people, it becomes a thing that people start doing in their everyday lives. It becomes known as getting downsized. And they present it in such a cool way because the way that this movie shows the downsizing process and the whole choice of whether or not you want to do it is exactly how, in America anyway, in the Western world, exactly how it would be. And what I mean by that is this, because when you downsize, you obviously can't live, if you live in New York City, if you live in the middle of Manhattan and you downsize, you can't still live in the middle of Manhattan. You will get crushed. So the way it works is real estate magnates or what have you, to profit off of this giant thing that's happening in the world, they create communities called micro-communities where small downsized people can live. And these micro-communities are they're walled off, they've got a net over them. They're maybe the size of a shopping mall. A shopping mall is a big place. So imagine if you're this big, how many of you can fit in a shopping mall? The answer is lots. So if you have a space of land that is the size of a regular shopping mall, you can fit thousands upon thousands of tiny little houses like the size of like a dollhouse, in which you and your family can live. And the beauty of it is these builders, the ingenuity that Alexander Payne came up with for this, which I loved it so much, was the builders capitalized off the whole idea of like greed, of like the Western idea of like, we want more. So when you downsize, you can get a house that is literally a mansion, a sprawling mansion, because it'll only cost you like $2,000, because the mansion is like maybe the size of my desk, if that, maybe less. So it's it takes the idea of like, I want to live in a mansion. Sure, I don't. I live in a basement apartment, as you can see. But if I had the opportunity to downsize and live in a mansion, of course I would do that, because I get to live in a mansion. So these builders who create these micro communities, they know, oh, you want to live in a mansion? You want to drive a Lamborghini? Well, obviously, you can't afford it in the real world, because mansions cost millions of dollars, and Lamborghinis are right up there too. So what if you lived in a mansion that was about yay big and you drove a Lamborghini that was about yay big? Suddenly that looks a lot more affordable. Suddenly that $2,000 mansion that's the size of my desk is very much within your means. Suddenly that $100 Lamborghini that's the size of a Hot Wheels, yeah, I can drive that around. That's not a problem. You've got these micro communities where literally everybody who was like a white collar, middle class person in the big world is now living in a mansion, driving little sports cars around and like snazzy little golf carts. And it's this weird utopia, this Stepfordish utopia that everybody sort of agrees on, because it's like, why not? We can afford it now. But the story of the movie, which I should be getting into by now, is it's about a character named Paul Safronic, who is played by Matt Damon. And Matt Damon and his wife want to downsize because they can't, their houses, their bills are expensive. They got bills to pay. You know what? They thought, why don't let's just liquidate all our assets, and let's take that money and spend a tiny fraction of it on a mansion that we can live in, because we'll be downsized. So Matt Damon and his wife sign all the papers. They go through the process. They sell all their possessions except for like a few small trinkets, and then they go downsize. And Matt Damon goes through the procedure, and a few hours later he wakes up and he's downsized, and he's all like, oh, this is great. My new life begins now. And then he gets a phone call from his wife, and his wife says, I couldn't go through with it. I got cold feet at the last second, and I'm leaving you. That happens maybe 45 minutes into it. This is a long movie. I should say that. This movie's about 2.5 hours long. So it's a juicy bite. It's a big bite of a story, and it takes a while to get going. But basically, the main crux of the story sort of begins once Matt Damon has downsized, and now he's alone. Because he's living in this giant mansion that he thought he could afford, because him and his wife were pooling their money. But turns out, no, she backed out. So now he's kind of screwed over. He's small and he's alone, and he has to live in an apartment instead. It's still a nice apartment, but it's not, the mansion. So he's back to being a white-collar, middle-class schlub, even though he's small now. So she literally really screwed him over. The rest of the story is just sort of him picking up his life afterwards. It's kind of like a midlife crisis, except the crisis is being shrunk, if that makes sense. There's an actress in this movie named Hong Chow, who plays a character named Ngoc Lan, this Vietnamese woman that Paul meets. And I gotta say, Hong Chow, I don't think I've ever seen her in anything, but she rocked it. She was the best part of this movie. I think hands down, she did the best acting job out of anybody. Like, she was just... Every time she was on screen, you paid attention to her. She just captivated the camera. She was great. Of course, we have Christoph Waltz, who I did not know was in this. That was a pleasant surprise. He plays this great, weaselly kind of European guy named Dushan, who at the end of the day turns out to have a heart of gold, and he's a really cool guy, and he becomes good friends with Matt Damon. Once you get about an hour and a half into the movie, that's when you sort of meet the main characters for the first time as a group, being Matt Damon, Christoph Waltz, and Hong Chow. Those three are our main characters. Matt Damon's wife, who we thought was going to play a bigger part, she's not in it at all, really. I will get into spoilers now. I don't consider it a spoiler to tell you that Matt Damon's wife had got cold feet, because that was in the trailer. Once he moves into his apartment, he moves out of his tiny mansion into a tinier apartment. He is neighbors with Dushan, who is Christoph Waltz's character, and they meet and they become friends. And then he meets Nok Lan, Hong Chau's character, and they meet and they become friends, and eventually they become lovers, because it's a love story too. You know, we follow them. They're pretty much the main characters, like I said. And that, I think, is the reason why Downsizing doesn't work, because the plot itself just kind of meanders. I mean, if you were to ask me to elevator pitch this movie, like, what is Downsizing about? I don't think I could describe it any other way as, you know, a man gets shrunken down and is left with nothing and has to sort of build a new life for himself. And that sounds interesting, but it's a very slow movie. And like I said, it is a very long movie. It is quite long, and it feels long. Like earlier in the year, we had long movies like The Last Jedi or Blade Runner. Blade Runner was pushing 3 hours, but it didn't feel long because you're just having such a goddamn great time watching. You're just like, oh my god, what's next? There's robots and flying cars are in this world. But with Downsizing, because it's such a slow movie and such a long movie, you really feel the length. Like you sort of get to that part where you're sitting there towards the end of the movie and you're like, God, all that stuff with Matt Damon and his wife was a long time ago. I don't have a problem with slow movies. I obviously don't have a problem with long movies, if you know me by now. Slow movies are fine. Slow movies are great. You know, as long as they're doing their job, they can be as slow as they need to be. The reason why I think Downsizing's slowness is a detriment to it is just because I don't feel like the movie's plot went anywhere, really. Like I said, he moves into this apartment, then he meets these other two characters and befriends them, and it just sort of shows his friendship with them as he goes on and lives the rest of his life. There's a beautiful moment towards the end where they go to Norway in the original first colony that was ever shrunk. And the people there have built a bunker deep in the earth because there's methane coming from Antarctica or something, and the methane is going to kill everybody within like 100 or 200 years or something. So these Norwegians, including the scientists who first invented Downsizing, they build this bunker where they are going to sort of have this mass exodus, live in the bunker for a couple thousand years and procreate in there, and basically come back out when it's safe again, when the methane's gone, and restart humanity as small people, which is another really cool idea. And the climax of the movie kind of just revolves around Matt Damon wondering, hey, maybe I should go with them because that sounds cool. But Nok Lan, who is now his love interest, she doesn't want any part of that. She's like, I'm not going down in that bunker. So Matt Damon is like, do I go with this woman that I just discovered that I love, or do I go in this bunker and become part of history? We're in the spoiler section. He chooses the woman he loves and he goes with her. There's a beautiful moment that I think it's one of the most touching moments of the whole movie, where these people, you know, a couple hundred people about to go into this bunker, and obviously they're never going to come out of the bunker again. So the day before they do that, they are all standing around watching the last sunset they will ever see. And it's this moment, it's about 2 minutes long, and there's no dialogue. It's absolutely quiet. All you can hear is like the sounds of nature, and they're just staring at a sunset, and a lot of them are you know, crying because it's like, that's it, I'm never going to see the sun again. And that was gorgeous. Oh, that got me right in the feels. Good job, Alexander Payne. At the end of the day, I was just not super impressed with this because I don't think they used the idea of shrinking to its fullest extent. I just don't think they did. There are a few little tiny cool moments like this one here with this giant, you know, they have a bottle of Absolute vodka and it's, you know, the size of a boat to them, and they're all just sort of taking little sips from it. Stuff like that is what I like to see in shrinking movies. Like, I love the idea of how small people interact with big parts of the world, and I just loved seeing the world that was created for these small people. I loved seeing how that culture was going to work, how micro communities worked, how their economy was going to be, etc. So I loved all of that. And it wasn't quite a lot of that because it needed to focus obviously on Matt Damon's character and on his life. So I think the problem is that you could have told this really beautiful story without the shrinking. You could have just had this man going to buy a house with his wife, and then she gets cold feet and leaves, and everything else could have happened in the normal world, is what I'm trying to say, including the ecological disaster happening in Antarctica. You could have had all that without the shrinking. The shrinking was just sort of background noise at the end of the day, and that kind of bummed me out, because that was my favorite part. Obviously, the human stuff was beautiful, but it didn't really play well with the shrinking. They were both amazing, but together they didn't find like a good way to coexist in the same story. I wish this was a Black Mirror episode. I wish somebody had made a Black Mirror episode about downsizing, to see, like, get down in the nitty gritty of, like, how does that world work now? Where, how's this going to be integrated into the world? Are big people going to be, terrorizing small people? One thing that obviously I know this was not going to be in this movie, because it's an Alexander Payne movie, and it's a love story, and it's about people and humans, and I get that, and I love that. But one thing that, because I'm just a boy, what I thought would have been fun to see is, like, little people running from, like, a tarantula or something, or like a giant, like a beetle or like a fly, like a big fly just chasing people. I understand this is not that kind of movie. They even specify in the movie, like, when you have these micro communities, one of the important things you have to do is cover it with, like, a mosquito net, because otherwise you will have bugs killing human beings. But, I'm sitting there thinking, like, God, how cool would it be if just, like, a giant, like, hornet just started terrorizing this micro... But no, obviously that's not this kind of movie, and I fully 100% understand that. But when you deal with shrinking, that's, those are the kind of things that come to mind. Stuff like Magic School Bus, stuff like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I loved both of the stories being told in Downsizing. I loved this world of shrinking people and making it good for the economy, and having a world based around that. And I loved the story of this man and his turning over a new leaf and starting a new life and making new friends. I loved both of those stories separately of each other. Together, I feel like they just sort of canceled one another out. Every time they talked about shrinking, it nullified the human aspect. Every time they talked about the human aspect, it nullified the shrinking. I kind of wish this was two separate movies. I recommend you see it just because it is fun, and it is a beautiful story. Like I said, the actors all did a great job, especially Hong Chow. Love that lady. She was so much fun. I would recommend seeing it just for no other reason other than I love supporting original ideas. I love giving money to a movie where the script is brand new and it's fresh and it's not based off anything. I love that. If you're one of those people who complains, like, there aren't enough original movies coming out in Hollywood anymore, everything's a sequel and a superhero comic now, go see this, because you will support original work. But that's Downsizing, and that has been Thumb Together. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like me and to subscribe to my channel right there. I can't remember where the subscribe thing is. I almost pointed at my crotch. This is turning into a bad show. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time on Thumb Together.